Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bridging Divides podcast. We're excited to have you guys here again. I'm really excited to bring my guest to you today, Yvonne DiMatteo. She has her own company going on, let's see, how many years has it been?
Just over 2 years now.
Just over 2 years. She is awesome. She is a financial literacy coach, and I will let her introduce herself. So your company name?
Yes, my company is The Home Economist, LLC.
Awesome.
I started off in corporate finance. So I'm the very first person in my family to graduate college, which is a big deal.
Big deal.
It's a big deal. I got a bachelor's degree in business administration, and it had a concentration in economics and finance.
Sweet.
Then after working, corporate finance for at least 5 years or so, I decided to go back and get my MBA. So then I had a total of about 14 years in corporate finance, but my passion always lied in personal finance.
Was that hard to be in corporate finance? Like, I don't know. It's like I think corporate finance and I think, lack of ethics, cutthroat. It's like all these like Wolf of Wall Street. You know what I mean? It's like that's what I have in my mind.
My experience was not like
No?
that at all. It was nothing like the movies.
Good.
First thing, I was assistant accountant for a startup company, so pretty much did all the grunt work. Didn't matter how good my grades were in college. I still started at the bottom of the totem pole.
Right, exactly.
But we all do, and you work your way up. My second job was at Charles Schwab as a financial analyst.
Awesome.
And I was so thankful that I got the opportunity to become an analyst. I worked in profitability analysis, so it was a lot of activity-based costing and reporting.
Yeah, and it's like that might sound boring to some, but it's so important. Like with all this YouTube and all this other stuff that we're doing, such a huge part of it is analytics. Seeing how many people are watching and all this other stuff. And I very much on the personal side. I like the personal, the interpersonal connections and that sort of thing. But I also really love the analytical side. So I can say, okay, well, how are we doing? How am I moving forward and all that sort of stuff.
And that's what activity-based costing did at Charles Schwab.
Cool.
We got to look at profitability from the perspective of the client segments. So it's
Awesome.
not just the normal financial statements, the balance sheet, profit and loss statement.
For the company itself. Mm-hmm. Cool. That's really interesting. And so it sounds like that was kind of a good segue into the personal side anyway.
It was. Actually, one of my experiences at Schwab, because Schwab had rolled out this new marketing saying that they were trying to make everybody financially fit. But in doing so, they offered these lunch and learns for their employees. So I went to a couple of these lunch and learns, and there were so many of us employees who were sharing information about our personal finances and how we were struggling paycheck to paycheck. We were in debt like crazy. We didn't know how to make ends meet. And I thought to myself, here is a company, mind you, Schwab is an amazing company.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah. I've used them since I was a kid.
But there was something missing. There was a gap missing between the everyday person like myself and all my coworkers and then their clients who were wealthy folks who had the net worth to invest.
Right.
There was something missing there that we just couldn't get the education, really. Like, how do we get ourselves out of financial trouble? How do we get to the point where we have enough money to be investors?
No, and I think that's an amazing divide that you're bridging of you see the people that have that money to invest and that's great that they're doing that. They're making themselves financially free, taking that stress away, at least in part from their life, but then also saying, okay, well, how can we bring that to as many people as we can, to give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because the opportunities are out there, but if we don't know about them, then how are we ever going to take advantage of it? If we don't even know how they work,
Exactly.
Then we're not going to be able to take advantage of them. So I have been super excited to have Yvonne on. I've talked to you even before I started doing this.
Yes, you had shared with me a long time ago how this was a passion of yours and you really wanted to get it started. And I said, hey, if you ever do, call me up.
I know. So I'm so excited that we're doing this. This will be episode 14 or 15. I can't remember exactly which one we're on, but we're moving. And so I was really excited to be able to call you and say, hey, it's time, let's have you on. And so, kind of something kind of fun. And honestly, I really loved your answer here. What is something that no one knows about you, or very few know about you?
Ken Jeong is my idol. When I was a little girl, all I wanted to do was be a movie star when I grew up. And life didn't lead me in that direction. But when I learned that he had quit his job as a physician, I think he said he was a physician for Kaiser or something.
And
so
he's like
real,
in his 40s.
Yes. And he quit his job to pursue his comedy and acting career. I was just like, that is, I loved it. I can't even describe how excited I am. So whenever I see him, and he takes all these little cameo roles too. Yeah. It's not even like a big role for everything. I remember seeing him, I don't know if it was Ant-Man or
one Avengers movie.
He was one of the Avengers movies. He was just like the guy in the security guy in the storage area.
Big old, mustache.
And I was like, oh my God, that's Ken Jeong. I know,
it was so funny. And I am 100% with you. Like, I love whenever somebody doesn't take what they've been given in life, which he had a great career.
Yeah.
I mean, that's people dream of that, and that's great. But he wanted more.
It wasn't his passion, I guess. The being a physician wasn't his passion.
And so instead of saying, well, this is where I am, I'm just going to accept it, why not jump into the unknown, One of my favorite quotes, I think his name's John Shedd. I might be getting his name wrong. Sorry, dude, whoever you are. But he said that a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for.
That's true.
Just like, oh my gosh, like I love that imagery. And I love the principle of saying, okay, like, you might be safe in your harbor, and you've worked really hard to get there, but you gotta
get
go
out. You gotta try. Live life and have those adventures.
Absolutely. Life is supposed to be an adventure. I absolutely agree. I mean, from the beginning, oh my gosh, like childbirth that's an adventure right there. That is not a calm experience. I just gotta say, I've got 6 kids, so we've done it a lot. Like,
imagine being on the birthing end.
No, thank you. You guys, I will leave that to you guys. That is, you guys don't get enough credit because yikes, that is quite the adventure. So we talked a bit about your mission, the divide that you're bridging. We had touched on that, which again I think is so vital to everybody, really. I mean, we've talked about, you were just mentioning to my wife how even people of our generation are, they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have learned this
when I was in high school. Yeah.
And we talk about the up and coming generation and all of those and I mean, we say that a lot. Which, I mean, of course, I wish I would have gotten started when I was 15 instead of in my 30s, but still, I mean, this is important stuff for everybody to know.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really good questions here, and you gave such great thought to them, which I thought was great. You said you felt like you were doing a midterm again. That was really fun.
I did feel that way, and I hope I don't butcher the answers after giving so much thought over the weekend.
No, hey, we're just having a good, fun conversation. And so some of the specifics that I really wanted to get into, and I loved some of your answers. I was like, ooh, we're going to have a really good conversation with this. So how can being financially healthy improve our mental health?
There are so many emotions tied to money and personal finance, and for most of us, the experience has been negative. Mm-hmm. Who hasn't felt guilty or envious or, I can't even think of all the other negative thoughts, just hopeless, like scared when it comes to your money.
Yeah.
And a large part of that comes with the unknown, that we were never taught how to prepare for the bad times in life. And so when you become empowered through the education of financial literacy and personal finance, you start to see money in a different way.
Yeah.
And you start to recognize that we're human, we make mistakes, those emotions are normal, but you can also change your perspective with money and turn those into positives. I had my very first coaching client. Her son took my 7-week course at Neely Traditional Academy
Great.
out in Gilbert.
Which we can find that, right, if people are interested in doing that?
I'm not offering that one next semester. I actually don't have the lineup for next semester yet.
Okay.
I'm still working with Gilbert Public Schools, but I do most of my workshops through Gilbert Public Schools. I've done 5th and 6th graders, junior high and high school with their parents, and
Cool.
now I'm currently doing an adult financial literacy boot camp.
Okay, well, let us know.
Sure.
So that we can, if when you get that up, that we can tell to everybody about it.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, anyhow, this woman, her son had taken my course, and several months after he finished, I get a phone call from her, and she said, "Hey, my 12-year-old son has learned so much about money from you from taking that course. Is there anything you can do to help me?" And I
Wow,
said,
that's cool.
"As a matter of fact, I coach people. I coach individuals and couples." But I did explain to her, I said, I'm very particular about who I'm willing to coach, because there's been a lot of people out there who say they want to get their financial act together, but they're not willing to put forth the effort.
It's interesting. It's like wanting is one thing, and then wanting to want to is a whole other thing.
Actually taking the steps to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this woman convinced me that she wanted to make a change.
Cool.
And I've actually been coaching her for over 1.5 years now. She's my first client to make it through the full year, which is fantastic. And our very first session is known as the major planning session. It's usually about 2 hours long. It's when we just look at the numbers. It's kind of like holding the mirror up and having to face yourself and face what kind of situation you've gotten yourself into.
Yeah.
And going through this, it turns out that she wasn't in as bad of a situation as she thought.
Interesting.
It was just a matter of some timing. So when people get their paycheck, let's say all your bills are due at the beginning of the month, right?
Right.
So your last paycheck of the month ends up paying all those bills, and then you don't have any money to bridge that gap until your next paycheck. So then that's when people start getting into trouble with credit cards and having to borrow money.
Right.
And then the next paycheck that they get, they don't have any bills to pay right away because they've already paid them all for the month. So then that's when they start to just spend that money instead of thinking ahead. I need this.
Because it's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
So going through this process with her and just shifting a few things around, the second time I met with her a month later, I asked her how she was sleeping. Did she notice any change? And she said, absolutely, she's sleeping better at night.
See, that's so cool.
Because that worry of, am I going to have enough money to pay my bills, was gone. She faced that fear that she had been hiding from for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And just one session was amazing for her to make that much of a difference. And I mean, sleep and stress and all that on your mental health, it makes a world of a difference when you're not afraid of your money.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much fear that surrounds money that when you're experiencing fear, you can't focus on actually finding a way forward, and being successful with it.
Your emotions are driving your actions or your inactions, as opposed to being able to just look at it from a logical standpoint and saying, okay, this is manageable, or it's worse than I thought, but here's what I have to do, and making a plan.
And that's such an empowering point of view to have as well, because that puts the control back in your court as opposed to being out, like having the control, out in you don't even know what, these outside forces that are controlling what it is that you're doing.
And you're constantly being reactive as opposed to being proactive with your money.
100%. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. And it's like money can't buy you happiness, but it can certainly make it a lot easier to pursue.
Buys you freedom, that's for sure.
It buys you freedom.
The freedom to live your life the way you want.
Exactly, 100%. And I'm very much of the viewpoint that if money is the primary focus in your life, then you're doing something wrong. But it should be a focus, maybe just number 2 or 3, on the list of things you find most important.
It is. I remember writing up one of the answers is that money is an important part of life, but it's not the most important part.
Yeah.
And people tend to forget that.
Yeah. It's a great segue into the question that that I was really, really intrigued by is there such a thing as too much money?
I believe there is. I believe at a
Oof, I
certain
love
point.
this because I disagree. And so
And
I was
no,
like,
that's okay.
I was like, we're going to have a great conversation.
That's the personal and personal finance, though,
I
right?
was like,
Like, I
ooh.
teach not my kids, but my students that. I'm like, you may not agree 100%
Yeah.
with what I say, but you have to remember that my perspective on money has been shaped by my life experiences.
Yeah. So let's unpack this.
Okay,
Because I really
yes.
want... Okay, you said yes. So go into that.
So the example I gave is my grandparents had worked very, very hard all their lives to provide for their children. They had a large family. They had 7 kids. And I think by the time my grandmother passed, like 15 grandkids and going on like a dozen great-grandkids or something like that.
Big family.
And they lived a very modest life, and it was always about family and community. And in January of 2021, my grandmother passed away. And when she died, there were 30 plus family members in the room with her. She died in her home.
Oh, wow.
She didn't want to be in a hospital. She wanted to be home, comfortable with her family. And it was one of those moments where I look back and I'm like, well, if I had to look back, if I'm 89 years old and I'm looking back on my life, yeah, that's what I want when I go. I want to be surrounded by the people I love, and hopefully I touch them all in a positive way, the way my grandmother did for each and every person in that room.
Yeah.
I had a very close friend whose grandmother actually died a couple months after my grandmother in March of 2021.
Yeah.
And this friend's grandparents, they had also worked very hard in life, but their focus was to accumulate wealth. And in doing so, they burned a lot of bridges among their family members. So between those grandparents, the grandfather had passed away a few years prior, and the grandmother actually spent most of her last couple years of life alone in her gigantic house, surrounded by all her luxuries.
Yeah.
But didn't have a whole lot of family coming to visit her. And when she passed, my friend wasn't even by his grandmother's side.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where you think about money. It should be a means to get you what you need and a little bit of fun in life.
Yeah.
But after that point, it's not about how much you can accumulate. It's about how much of an impact you can have on other people in your lifetime. When you look back at your life, are you going to be happy to have had all that money? Because you're not going to take it with you.
Right.
Or would you be happy that you helped others or that you lived a very fulfilling life?
Yeah, what I like to say is enrich to get rich.
Okay.
Because my whole thing is that, I would love to be a billionaire. I would not say no to that. But at what cost? So, and I love everything that you're saying. And so in my point of view is impact before income, like you're saying. But the more that I have, the more impact that I can have. So in my mind, I'm thinking too much money. I'm like, no, I don't think that there could be too much, so long as it is not at the expense of relationships, values, and what you believe at your core, and so I obviously nobody gets to the end of their life and is like, man, I wish that I would have just made a little bit more money. I wish that I had, like you said,
I'd spent more time with my kids while they were growing up, or I wish I had helped out the homeless more or something.
Right. And so in my point of view, I'm like, yeah, if I have more, I take care of myself, and then I'm comfortable, I have enough to have fun. And then beyond that, I go, okay, well then, like I want to do more to help. Not that we shouldn't help homeless or help people until we have wealth, but it just allows you to do more of those good things.
When I teach my workshops and I talk about donating, I talk about donating in 3 different forms: time, treasure, and talents.
Ooh.
So a lot of folks think that they have to have a lot of money in order to give back, but that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot more people making impact who don't have a lot of money simply by going out and helping at the food bank. My grandpa started doing that after he retired. He found out I had started working at the David and Lucille Packard Foundation and how they're all about charitable work.
Awesome.
And so every Tuesday, my 91-year-old grandpa gets up and he goes to the food bank and hands out food to people in need in the Bay Area.
That's awesome.
And so it's not necessarily about how much money you have, but I can see like it would be kind of cool to be like, yeah, I got my private jet or something like that.
Yeah, see, I don't think that I would want that. See, because this is where I might differ from other people that are like, yeah, I want to have a bunch of wealth, because I actually think that that's an irresponsible way to use your wealth.
To spend your money.
Now, I could get, because I was talking to somebody recently and he was talking about how he was going to hire a driver, and while some people might be like, oh, hey, that's fancy, he is doing it specifically so that he can free up his time to spend the time that he would driving, which he spends a lot of time doing, and maximize the time to be able to have more free time later. So I was like, okay, that...
So he can work while his driver's
right.
taking him
So
to the next location.
He's using money as a way to trade it for time, which you can't get back. You can make more money, you can't make more time.
That, absolutely, yes.
And so that is where I could go, okay, I can see getting a driver. But it's like, if you're getting a private jet so that you can spend thousands of dollars in fuel to fly to a specific place, to get a haircut that costs thousands of dollars, and then spend $1,000 to drive home, it's like, well, okay. I see that as irresponsible. I'm all about having more and more wealth to be able to do more and more good things, but I just think that that's a waste. I really, really do.
It's hard to say. I mean, imagine if you won one of those lotteries where it's like,
I have a hard time
$1 billion. Are you not going to do anything fun with it? It's hard to say. You don't know until you're in that situation, which is why I always tell people, don't judge others. Like,
no
absolutely,
way.
Especially based on what you're seeing, because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't know what that person's actual net worth is until you see their personal balance sheet.
Positively or negatively.
Yeah.
Like we can't judge anybody. And I definitely don't mean that in a judgmental way, because you get to a certain point and you can't be like, oh, well, they have a private jet, so they're, they should use that money to do good. And then you see them, like you say, the things that they're not showing everybody is that they're giving millions away.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so yeah, they have a private jet. Yeah, they have a super nice car. But they are also super giving and kind and giving of their time, treasures, and talents.
Yeah.
Like you said, I love those three things. Give what you have. I think that's fantastic.
It all comes down. I keep telling my students, like, personal finance is personal, and you have to make the choices yourself. Don't let others influence you in making your decisions of what's right or wrong, or how you should spend your time, or how you should spend your money. You have to figure it out for yourself. And that's going to change throughout your lifetime. Like, what I wanted to do when I was in my 20s was very different in my 30s versus my 40s now.
Right.
Life changes, your taste, your preferences, your family changes, your needs change. So it's hard to say what anyone should or shouldn't do. But there are certain things that you can do to improve your situation, in terms of like education, and absolutely, you should save more and spend less. Like, if you're not in a good situation, that is definitely something that everyone would agree on. Like, hey, you got to get your good habits built first.
Absolutely. Because you can have that goal of, I want to have the nice car. I want to be able to have, a jet later on in life. But what is going to get you there? What are you going to do, habit-wise, to be able to get you there?
To get there.
Because you should not be banking on winning the lottery.
Absolutely.
Sorry to all of you that buy lottery tickets, but that is it hurts me every single time I see somebody buying one. Because how many hundreds of dollars a month do people spend on lottery tickets? Or I'm like, if you would just put that away.
To something else.
To something, whether it invested in something, education or an account or something, to be able to increase your potential to earn.
Well, that leads to people wanting get rich quick things.
And it just does not work that way.
Is one of the things that people are expecting when you think of investing. They think about the glamorous side of like, oh, well, I know somebody who bought into Bitcoin when it was $1 a Bitcoin or something, and now 30-something thousand. And it's like that's all you see are the glamorous things out there, especially on social media. There's so many people out there saying, well, I'll teach you how to get rich, or I'll teach you how to do this or that. I remember having a friend tell me she saw some guy on TikTok who was saying, stop contributing to your 401k and buy this investment that never, ever decreases. And to me, I was like, right away, I'm like, okay, that doesn't logically make any sense. There's risk in all investments.
Right. Exactly. If anybody says that something is guaranteed,
yes,
you should go the other way. I mean, you have to... There are low-risk investments, I'll give you that.
Oh, yeah.
But if someone says that there's no risk, that's where I start to get leery.
Absolutely.
Like,
And it turned out a couple months later, this guy that she was showing me got caught like doing some fraudulent things, pyramid scheme type stuff. And I said, you can't just believe everything you see out there. And it's hard because I now post to social media. I barely started last year on Facebook and a month or so ago on Instagram. And it's like, how do people trust me and what I'm teaching them?
Right. But you have to have a good foundation. If you don't have a good foundation, then any sort of new thing comes blowing in and it's going to blow you all over the place. But you have to have that good foundation so that you can determine for yourself, is that really something that I can take advantage of, or is it something that's gonna destroy me?
Absolutely.
You know, which I have had experiences with cryptocurrency. I lost over 10 grand.
Yeah.
And I just went,
hard lesson learned,
that
right?
That is a hard lesson learned. But then on the flip side, you know, my brother has an investment company, Hedgehog Investments, super awesome.
Which we talked about that time we had lunch.
And I love what they do because even though that they are very low risk and they give high returns, 12 to 20%, it's fantastic. But they will line it out for you. I mean, they will put it in front of you and say, this is the risk. This is how we've mitigated the risk, and then you can make your choice. You know, but any time that somebody says that no risk is involved, I go, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to take from me?
Absolutely.
You know? But no, I think that that's fantastic. All right. So this is a mindset question, and we kind of touched a little bit on it, but is money evil? Because we've heard the adage, scripture, whatever you want to call it, that money is the root of all evil. What's your opinion on that, and why?
I don't think money is evil. I think the need for money or greed, so the choices that people make either out of greed or out of need for money leads to unethical decisions. I don't think money itself is evil. So greed, obviously you're wanting to accumulate as much as you can, causes you to...
Just for the sake of having it. Scrooge McDuck type
deal. Yeah, kind of thing like that. But if you think about it from the need perspective, think about people who grew up in socioeconomically challenged areas. And they don't have all the necessities of life that those of us who did take for granted.
Right.
And so for these young kids and young adults, crime is a way of getting what they need.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, and that's brings us back to what we were saying before, which is we cannot judge whether someone has or doesn't have. We can't judge what it is that they're doing because we don't know.
You don't know
where they're coming from with that.
I mean, if you think about it, if your family was in need of food and you had no other way to get it and provide for them but to steal it from somewhere or someone else, would you do it? I mean, you don't know until you're in that situation.
Until you're there, for
sure. And is that a justification for your choices?
Yeah, see, and that's what's hard, and that's why we can't judge other people. To your point, like, I think that money is a tool. Are you going to use that tool for good or not.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's not inherently evil. A hammer isn't evil. You can either build or you can destroy. It's up to you. You know, I also heard someone say that money is a catalyst. It makes you more of who you are. You know, so if you're a good person, then you're going to use it to do more good. And if there's, you know, if there's something in there that's dark, then yeah, it can magnify that as well. But I think to your point though of you know, out of greed or need, that is where the unethical happens. And while I would certainly be a little bit more lenient to someone that was in the need category to go, okay, I can see why. I'm a little bit more lenient towards that than the greed side, but at the same time, not that stealing is good. It never, you know, that's never a good thing. But I think that giving the power back to a person by giving them knowledge.
That is what I'm trying to do with my business.
Beautiful.
As many people as I can touch and change their lives by just giving them that power to understand how money works and how their emotions, how their decisions can affect how they live their lives. I mean, we're not all dealt the same cards. We're not all dealt the same hand.
Say that we are, yeah.
But if you figure out what hand you have, you can then figure out what you need to make it better.
Where to go from there. Yeah, because whether if it's race, if it's gender, if it's where you were born, I mean, everybody that was born in the States is automatically in such a better position than anybody that's outside of the States.
Absolutely.
You know, but then within the States, you got to understand, like, that they're, you know, whether it's a race or a gender, you know, we talk about the difference in pay between genders, and then also the things that go on with racism and different things like that. But that also depends on where in the country or in the world that you are. You know, and so that is, I love how you put that though, is that not everybody's dealt the same hand, but as long as we know what hand we have been dealt, and then we can go from that point to then improve it.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that that's great.
And one of the things I try to teach people is that we don't all have to be billionaires to have a good life.
Right.
Just having enough passive income to cover our necessities and then a little bit of extra fun money gives you so much more time without the burden of having to like do the grind in the office or
100%.
the job site or wherever you are every day, and then you come home exhausted, and you know your kids want to play with you and you're like, I just need a minute, like let me decompress.
Drained. Yeah.
It's a world of a difference, because I've been through the very troublesome financial situation.
Yeah.
And now my husband and I have worked very hard to get ourselves out of that situation and into a better one. And moving out here to Arizona, I wasn't expecting to start a business. I was expecting to go back to work full time.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out pay-wise. I just couldn't get a job that would pay me what I felt
you were worth.
I was worth,
Yeah.
and what I felt would be worth enough for me to spend the time away from my family. And now having the flexibility to be there for the kids and be there for my husband and still do what I need to do. I mean, I haven't exercised this much in forever. I mean, it's always been one of those things that I'm like, I want to exercise. I just don't have the time for it.
Right. It goes on the back burner.
It does. But that leads me to one of my favorite sayings, is that you always have time for the things you prioritize. So if you want to be in a better financial situation, you need to make your finances a priority. For me, if I want to lose weight or I want to be healthier, I have to make exercising and eating healthy a priority.
Right. And it's not to say that you can't do that while you're trying to improve your financial situation. However, like we were saying before, it just gives you more freedom mentally, emotionally.
Absolutely.
And, you know, to as well as just actually having more time to be able to pursue those things, to dedicate, you know, towards those goals. So what I want to jump into, because we're approaching the end of our time here.
Sure.
What are the top things that we can all do in order to be more financially healthy.
Okay, I'm going to look at my notes on this one because there are so many things I could tell you, and I narrowed it down to 4.
Yes, please.
The first is that save more and spend less. This is super easy if you're a natural saver, but if you are a natural spender like myself, and I can guarantee anybody out there watching this, you're like, yep, that's me.
Yeah, that's me.
This is much more difficult. But with practice, it will become a habit and it becomes second nature.
Cool.
And I'm not saying you have to cut back on all your spending.
Have fun.
You have to still live your life.
Yeah.
But it's more about becoming a conscious spender. And that makes a world of a difference when I teach about conscious spending.
Yeah, there was a previous episode with Michael Benton that we had where he talks about living consciously, just living consciously. Yeah. But that goes right in hand with that, is that you have to understand that every action that you have has a consequence, good or bad.
It does. And same thing with your finances.
Yeah. So number 2.
Number 2 was contribute to your retirement account as soon as you get your first job. Okay. So if your employer does not offer a 401k or some other type of employer-sponsored retirement account, open an IRA. If you meet the requirements, do it as a Roth as many years as you possibly can.
Cool.
But the time value of money and compound interest, the magic of compound interest, it can't work in your favor if you don't give it the time that it needs.
Exactly.
This goes into my thoughts about investing is supposed to be boring. It's supposed to be kind of a
long
put
game.
It in there, yeah, and you just wait and you watch, and eventually the growth will be exponential. But it's, if any of you have ever done like a math class where you have to graph an exponents, it's like really, really slow, close to the axis, and then all of a sudden it just shoots up.
That's how it works.
And that's how it works. So you need all that time for it to grow and build before you can get to that jump.
100%. Oh, I love that.
So that was number 2.
Yeah, number 3.
Number 3, don't keep up with the Joneses, and for the younger generation out there, don't keep up with the Kardashians.
Yeah, pardon our language. We'll bleep that out.
Oh, we're not allowed to say that one?
Kardashian. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was like, ooh, I didn't know that was a bad word these days.
Yeah, I'm just being silly. No, but yeah, absolutely. I think that's...
It goes back to the whole judging other people, and with social media and everything these days, it's so easy for young adults and kids to see the glamorous side of life, and that's not really what's going on. So if you focus more on yourself and your self-fulfillment, that's going to give you a much better perspective on personal finance and your life in general.
I think that why isn't necessary, depending on the situation, but I think that in this type of situation where we look at someone and say, why don't I have what they have? Instead ask, how can I get what they have? Because it's not necessarily even a bad thing to look at someone and say, hey, well, that looks cool, I want to do that too. But not from an envious, all-consuming negative aspect. But just go, well, if I don't have what they have, well then how can I get it? What do I need to do?
Well, what I teach my kids, because they ask all the time, well, how come our cousins get, quads and this and that and all the fun toys and stuff? And I said, everybody has a finite amount of money, and what they do with that is their choice.
Right,
and I said,
right.
Mom and Dad choose, like we chose to spend the money. For a long time we would buy Disneyland annual passports. So we would go to Disneyland multiple times a year. But I said, your cousins don't do that.
Right.
They don't get to go
It's
to
a trade-off.
Disneyland.
Yeah.
And then I said, and when we stopped doing Disneyland, it's because Mom and Dad made the choice to buy a vacation home. I said, and it's a vacation home that we can use on a regular basis.
Right.
I said, it's a trade-off, and we are consciously choosing what we want to do. When you get older, you can choose what you want to do with your money.
Right. No, I think that's great. That's absolutely awesome.
It sits a little bit better with them when they realize, oh yeah, we do have, it's counting your blessings, really. It's like, oh yeah, we do have a lot of wonderful things in our lives. You forget that.
Instead of focusing on what you don't have, focus on what you do have.
What you do have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So number 4.
Last one. Learn to use credit cards responsibly so you don't fall into the credit card trap.
I liked this one too because really popular. I mean, Dave Ramsey's super popular. No credit cards at all. That's a very, very black and white stance, which is cool. I mean, that serves a purpose. But explain that then. What is using credit cards responsibly look like? Yeah.
It means that you only charge what you have in the bank to be able to pay off at the end of the month.
At the end of the month, though, you don't wait to pay it, like
Well,
to
you
make
could pay
payments.
it, like, if you go to, say you go to the ballpark and, like, Chase Field or whatever, all of it's cashless, right? And you're like, I didn't know I had cash on me, because we did that the first time. We had cash and didn't know. And then so we had to swipe our card to buy the concessions or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to have the money. We could turn around the next day and put it to the credit card. It's not
But so,
necessarily you have to
yeah.
wait, but you have to be able to pay it all off.
Right.
That's charging responsibly. And I'm not anti-credit card. In fact, I teach my students that credit cards are good for online purchases. It's safer for you. So if your credit card number gets stolen and somebody charges a fraudulent charge to your thing,
They're
it's not hitting your bank account and taking your cash out. Let's say you sent your rent check in and they took out your money from your account and you hadn't caught the fraud yet, and then your rent check bounces and like all the bad stuff that comes along with overdraft fees and things like that. So for safety reasons, if you're going to do online purchases, that's why I recommend it. And then reservations. It's like you can't make a reservation these days without a credit card. So those would be the main reasons you would use a credit card.
Yeah.
But again, you don't charge unless you've got the money to pay it off in full.
And see, that I think is the difference. Instead of using it to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians, excuse my language, but instead of that, using it as a tool. Again, it goes back to that same principle.
Yes, exactly. It's a tool.
Right. That's beautiful.
And I hate that financial institutions target young adults. I mean,
because they don't know.
I got targeted at 18 years old with my first credit card, and it just led to, within just a few years, my husband and I ended up in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars in my early 20s, like over $100,000 between credit cards, department charge cards, because you go like Home Depot and you get the Home Depot card or Victoria's Secret card.
Or whatever,
Yeah, and I teach about the whole credit card trap. I should actually do a little video on my social media about how that trap works and how to avoid it. But yeah, I mean, it happens, and then before you know it, you're in over your head. They're charging crazy interest rates, 35% interest rate.
It's insane.
And you can't get out of the mountain of debt that you've accumulated.
Right.
And that's when all those negative feelings come in. You're ashamed.
You feel trapped.
You feel trapped. Yeah. I mean, you're embarrassed about the fact that you couldn't do it. You feel hopeless. And again, it's like, man, but if you'd have just known about credit cards and how they work before you got your first one, you would know how to avoid the trap.
How did you get out of that?
We had to get creative. So because we were natural spenders, not savers, one of the big things that we did was we increased our tax deductions for our paychecks, so that we had to learn to live off of a smaller paycheck and let the government hold our money until tax return time. And then we designated that large tax refund. I'm talking like $10,000 to $12,000 tax refund to different cards. And when those cards were paid off, we closed the accounts.
But out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Because even when we had it in a separate savings account, it was too hard for us not to be tempted to touch it. We could not touch it because the government was holding it for us.
That is such an amazing principle, though, of if you know yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses, instead of saying, well, I just need to be strong enough to withstand the temptation, just remove the temptation.
And that's what we had to do until we developed the habits of knowing how to save and knowing how to consciously spend our money.
Genius. Absolutely awesome. And that in and of itself is a huge what we're going to talk, a great segue into this next segment. We're going to the end of our time here, and
okay.
Such a great conversation.
I know we could go on for hours.
But the positivity prize fighter segment, which is all about that emotional resiliency, right? Because positivity to me is much less always having rose-colored glasses on, and much more about being emotionally resilient, and saying that the fight is still worth fighting even though I've gotten knocked down, that kind of a thing. And what I was saying before is that in and of itself is a great example of that, of how you had gotten into this situation, and how you got out of it. But can you, because we've had several discussions about some of the difficult things that you've been through, And I'm really excited to talk about this here. What is a moment in your life, or moments, however you want to go at it, but that life has knocked you down and you had to go, okay, I'm going to get back up and I'm going to keep fighting because it's worth fighting for?
On the note of the hand that we're dealt, I was, my brothers and I had, my mom was a single mom, but we were very fortunate to have my grandparents and all my aunts and uncles, so extended family in our lives. Yeah. When I was around 12 years old, 11 or 12, I think, my mom met a man who, she fell in love with, and she ended up having my youngest brother with this man. But he was an abusive man, verbally and psychologically and emotionally, for many, many years.
I'm sorry, that's hard.
And then eventually it turned physical. But it was so difficult for me to see this because I'm on the outside and I didn't understand, like, why would you stay with somebody like that?
Yeah.
And so I went along living my life hating the fact that my mom was in this situation, but I was in junior high, moved on to high school, got to meet my husband, and it wasn't even until after I had been out of high school for a couple years that she finally left him. But I had asked her, like, why did you stay with him for so long? Why did you take that abuse? And she said what all abusers would say, which is, like, he threatened to hurt you guys. That was one thing. The other was, I couldn't afford to raise you on my own. And that was a killer for me. And that was one of those things that growing up and experiencing that, I swore, one, I would never, ever allow myself to be in an abusive relationship whatsoever. And two, I would never, ever depend on somebody else financially, which is what drove me to get an education, to want to have a career, to want to make good money and make good financial decisions, right? So I've got all this passion and motivation behind me, but because I wasn't educated on personal finance and I wasn't financially literate, I got into trouble. I got into financial trouble. And my husband and I, we both did, because neither of us had been taught. And we were married at a pretty young age. I was only 22 years old when I got married.
Same.
So it was so quick and easy to get into this credit card trap and get car loans and personal loans and any other kind of thing, financing that's out there. And so it was something I swore I would never allow myself to be financially stuck in, like, a toxic environment. My husband and I recognized, because I'd seen what a bad relationship looks like, I recognized an amazing man when I met him. And he and I actually just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary last month. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So 20 years and 3 kids later, mostly happily married. Anybody who's been married knows it's mostly happily.
Marriage is hard work.
It's a relationship and it is work. And if it's one of those things that's always worth fighting for. But I have been in toxic work environments. In fact, the first job I had coming out here to Arizona, the first job I had was with a mechanical company up in Phoenix. And I had done all the interviews via Zoom. And so it's very different meeting somebody over the computer versus in person, body language, demeanor,
Presence,
all that. Yes. And the very first day I started the job, my direct manager, the CFO, struck me as an abusive person. In front of everyone else, he was this great guy, and as soon as we were behind closed doors, it just, his body language changed, his posture changed, the tone in his voice. And I told my husband the very first day, like, I don't think this is going to work out. And he said, you're there by yourself right now, just give it some time. 2 weeks in, like, he would say things to me behind closed doors like, how dare you make a recommendation to me? Didn't I tell you just to take the model and finish it?
Oh my gosh.
And I was just dumbfounded, right?
It's like, if you don't like it, just tell me. But, like, you don't have to. You don't have to be so.
So immediately I went to HR, and HR was just shocked that I had brought this up to them. And then I had to have another conversation with him after HR talked to him, and he's like, well, why don't you just stay on as a contractor, because I know you need the money. You're out here with your kids by yourself. I was like, oh, heck no. You don't know anything about my
Right.
situation.
But he's trying to
He
use,
was trying to intimidate me.
trying to use it as
Yes.
ransom, essentially.
Yeah, and he didn't know that we were just fine to have
Yeah.
me not working.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
no clue what was going on, behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And so it's just I don't ever want anybody to have to stay in either an abusive relationship or in a toxic work environment simply because they can't afford to leave.
Yeah.
And that is part of a driving factor and something that motivates me, and it's motivated me all my life, as well as what motivates me to help other people get their finances in order.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, Yvonne, I'm super happy that we know each other.
Thank you.
I'm super, super happy with what you're doing, and I love the divide that you're bridging. And we've been able to get a deeper look into why you do what you do, and just how amazing and noble that is. And so, thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate you coming here or inviting me here and letting me come share my story.
Absolutely, absolutely. And guys, we're super happy that you guys have joined us. Remember that no one can tell you what your worth is. And if you are in a situation like that you should get out of, but you don't know how to, there is a way to do it. Yvonne is definitely someone that can help you learn how it is that you should. Money can't buy happiness, but smart money management can definitely help. Love you guys. Keep being amazing.